Welcome back. A new directive from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency is aimed at trimming the attack surface bad actors can target with cyber hacks. Binding Operational Directive 23-02 includes deadlines for agencies when they discover certain kinds of intrusions. Todd Helfrich is Vice President for Federal at Censys. Todd, welcome. Thanks for coming on the program. What's included here?
Thanks for having me on the show, Francis. Relative to DHS Binding Operational Directive 2302, it's really focused on understanding the vulnerabilities and exposures that are available to the adversary from the external internet. A lot of organizations have focused on it for years at inside out, right? Securing, providing a layered defense. We call it defense in depth in industry. But there's been a lack of focus on the external assets. And over the last 2 years of COVID, we've had the single largest modernization effort across the federal government, where we've created a remote workforce. We have created applications that are available via the cloud. We have developers that are developing new and advanced applications to automate for the government. That challenge, right, has created an attack surface that organizations lack visibility to. Binding Operational Directive 2302 is really centered around finding the most critical management interfaces and management protocols on the internet to help eliminate those vulnerabilities that are known to be taken advantage of by the adversary.
How does that trim the attack surface, and what are the concepts that federal leaders should be thinking about regarding that, changing that attack vector?
Yeah, great question. One of the challenges that organizations have is understanding their assets. We have multiple different service providers, we have hybrid cloud environments, and this cyber hygiene issue that we need to focus on has been centered around eliminating vulnerabilities across our attack surfaces. There's a protocol or a framework that's known as a MITRE ATT&CK, pre-attack. Many folks are familiar with MITRE ATT&CK, but pre-attack is really centered around adversaries' reconnaissance that they're performing on an organization or target. And our adversaries are highly motivated. Utilizing that MITRE ATT&CK framework, pre-attack framework, really helps identify those assets that and processes that the adversary goes through that organizations need to work on fine-tuning or eliminating. The reason why DHS focused on this is because these are low-hanging fruit for the adversary. Having management interfaces accessible on the internet, easily compromised by the adversary. They're constantly searching deep and dark web, trying to own VPN infrastructure to take advantage of our critical infrastructure across the United States. It's not just a government agency, it's our infrastructure. And there's a number of organizations that are doing some good work for us.
The gold standard for this, the thing that people have aspired to, both in industry and government for years, has been how do we get ahead of the bad guys, and not to perform offensive operations, but to get out of the reactionary and move to the proactionary. Is this kind of moving in that direction? It sounds like with some of the techniques that you just described, that's where we're going.
Everybody's trying to get left to boom, right? At the end of the day, I think the changes that we've seen in the greatest, modernization effort across the federal government is where we need to focus. All these changes that have taken place over the last 3 to 10 years has really changed the vulnerabilities and exposures that we have within our enterprise defenders environments. Identifying them is sometimes really hard. It's not just run a vuln scan. It's look at associations, look at certificates, look at relationships of systems, look at your supply chain and your suppliers' vulnerabilities, because they too could be inherited, right? And an adversary could take advantage of our suppliers and ultimately gain access to our enterprises.
At some future point, what does implementation of this BOD look like when it's successful? What can the agency say exists or that they're doing or whatever, and what can CISA say they're overseeing the agency's doing that made this work?
We have already seen a progression. We've seen systems that have been taken offline or reconfigured, if you will, to eliminate these security weaknesses. But this is an iterative process. This isn't going away, right? You know, as I bring on a new supplier, as I bring on new infrastructure, as I deploy new Kubernetes in my cloud, ultimately I'm going to potentially have vulnerabilities and exposures that the adversary is looking for. So it's important that it's an iterative process.
Todd, thanks very much for joining me today. It's great to have you.
Francis, really appreciate the time today and appreciate you having me on the show.
You can read more about the new BOD from CISA at fedgovtoday.com.